the effect and the impacts on human societies of the so-called climate change issue depend entirely on when we change our economies away from dependency on fossil fuels. Had we lived up to the great 1988 target, we'd have lots of time for adjustments that would still be available to us. But we're running out of time because primarily over the whole of humanity, we continue to see greenhouse gases rise. So while some countries have done their work and brought greenhouse gases down to Kyoto targets and are now prepared to take on even steeper targets in the next round, far too many countries are still arguing about it. So at what point do we see CO2 stop rising such that the effects that are inevitable will be manageable by humankind? The good news is I think that where we are right now today, the effects, and they won't be pretty, and they will be difficult, they'll be challenging, they'll involve sea level rise, increased extreme weather events and droughts. But if we were to be able to go cold turkey and stop burning fossil fuels tomorrow, we would have impacts well into the future, but we'd be able to cope with them. There's a point at which, though, scientists sometimes call it tipping points, points of no return, where we could, through building up greenhouse gases to a level that exceeds what we can possibly imagine being able to which levels to which we could possibly adapt. That's the threat of runaway global warming. The important thing is we're still in time to take action. That's what's important. But how much time do we have? Well, according to the International Energy Agency, and this is supported by a lot of work within the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we can avoid the tipping points where we unleash runaway global warming as long as we make sure that the levels of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere stop rising globally. The level of greenhouse gases stop rising no later than 2015 or 2016. That means everywhere around the world, greenhouse gas levels either come down sharply in some countries more than others, but overall, greenhouse gas levels stop rising by 2015 or 2016 and start coming down at some level from there. That's what we need to buy ourselves the time to deal with everything else to avoid runaway global warming. So that's what Anthony Carey meant when he said the atmosphere is not negotiating with humanity. That's why there are real deadlines, not negotiated UN timelines or targets, real deadlines dictated to us by the science of understanding atmospheric chemistry and knowing that there are long lag times. And what we do today will be having an effect for, well, depending of course we take, for good or for ill, what we do today will have an immediate effect for at least the next century. There are long lag times in acting on the climate crisis. And if we unleash a runaway global warming effect, what we do today and in the next 5, 6 years will determine whether human civilization survives, which proves the point. Every time history repeats itself, the price goes up. It's not a price I'm prepared to pay. And I'm not prepared to be pessimistic about this either. I get infuriated with people who say, oh, well, it looks like it's all hopeless, so what's the point? We don't have in our hands absolute certainty about anything we do. But we do have good science that tells us we've still got time to act. And the one thing we can't afford to do is give up, ignore the problem, or decide it's hopeless. In fact, the fact that we have 180 countries from around the world who have already negotiated, albeit a long time ago, a framework convention on climate change, a Kyoto protocol, but not only that, we've had protocols that worked. We actually have protected the ozone protocol, the ozone layer, through the Montreal Protocol. It worked. There are multilateral agreements that have worked. And it's not that difficult to imagine our way, nation by nation, community by community, region by region, out of the current crisis. It is not hard to imagine because all the technologies we need to get ourselves out of this mess already exist, have already been invented, and there are people ready to bring them forward. A lot of things are being done at the subnational level in Canada, but unfortunately nothing's being done by our federal government to meet this challenge. So I wanted to just make sure I sketched out for you. It is difficult to say, as I've just said, that we have until 2016 to ensure greenhouse gas levels globally stop rising and begin to come down. but it's actually good news to know we still have time. There are a lot of things on our side here. There are a lot of things on our side. There's the fact that most governments around the world really do understand this issue. The fact that we're immersed in a country with a government that doesn't understand it, with a media that isn't reporting it, doesn't mean that we can't grasp these facts and share them with our friends and neighbors and make sure we hold sessions like this across the country and find the tools and give each other the support we need to make the changes that need to be made. Now, what can we do given that Copenhagen's less than a month away? We'll talk about this more, but I want to close with a few quick things that I think we all need help to do. One is support your local environmental groups, whatever they are. Post-Carbon Toronto, Toronto Environmental Action T, Sierra Club Ontario chapter. There's a whole bunch of good groups out there where you can find, if you don't want to become involved in a political party, or can do both, where there are good groups trying to make this change and they all need help. There is also becoming a non-stop media monitor. I would really appreciate help with this. The struggle for people's understanding and support is being waged right now in the blogosphere, on websites. I saw recently that in the US, the number of denier industry websites has more than doubled in the last year.
Wow.
As we get closer to an agreement, they didn't have to worry when George Bush was president, but they're worried about Barack Obama. So there's a tremendous increase right now in a campaign of disinformation. And one place that it manifests itself really easily, because it's free to get, and nobody censors what gets posted on these sites, goodness knows nobody censors what gets posted on most of these sites, is that every time an article appears in the newspaper anywhere about the climate crisis with accurate science, if you go to the comments section of the website of that newspaper, you watch, within about an hour, 80 people will log on to say it's all nonsense. And they'll cite all the same websites that agree with them. We need to take this on. We need to be prepared to write letters to the editor repeatedly, whether they get published or not. And by the editor, I mean the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, all local papers, the National Post, all of them. And we also need to pay attention to CBC website, the National Post website, the Toronto Star website, and log on with comments to say, I'm afraid that this kind of information, which you can put up here without any need to be accountable or responsible, is simply false. And I urge any readers who want the facts to look to the following websites that are responsible science. And just keep at it. It's a hard job. It's dispiriting because those websites, if you've looked at them, are nasty places. But it's worth trying. And we have to continue to make our voices heard through things like call-in radio shows that a lot of people listen to. There are Canadians out there. We know that over 70% of Canadians want action on the climate crisis. We need to continue to feed that base and build it and have more of those people who think they want action understand that it can be and must be done, because it's what offers us a hope for a livable world. This is not going to be easy, but it's a long way from impossible. It's exactly what we are here on Earth to be doing right now. Those of you who cared enough to come out tonight, there's nothing more important that we can do with our time and with our voices and with our energies than to make sure that we address the climate crisis in the next 5, 6, 7 years, but preferably in the next month. Because the Copenhagen negotiation is critical, and there is always hope for it to succeed if public pressure globally, through things like 350.org, through citizen mobilization, through youth climate work, through all of us together, make it clear that we are not prepared to accept that our generation ends the future for our children. We are not prepared to leave to our children a planet with out-of-control runaway global warming, and we are not prepared to allow the Canadian government to be a saboteur to the solutions that we most need to protect the future.